Another question in the discussion paper asks whether certain areas should be added to Schedule 4, and John spoke about that. Clearly, these areas should have been some time ago. For instance, there are 2 scientific reserves on the list for additions, which should have been in long ago. Such obvious additions to Schedule 4 should not be seen as a quid pro quo for removing other areas. I imagine that most submitters will be focused on the areas proposed for removal. But other changes envisaged in the discussion paper deal with an extremely important matter and must not be ignored. And I'm referring to changes that would undermine the long-standing role of the Minister of Conservation. Sorry about the pun with undermining. It's important to understand the process whereby mining can take place on DOC land. If land on Schedule 4 is to be mined, then that land needs to be removed from Schedule 4. That is a decision for Cabinet. But mining on conservation land managed by DOC, whether never on Schedule 4 or removed from Schedule 4, requires 3 kinds of approval, 3 stages. Step 1, the Minister of Energy and Resources has to grant a permit for the minerals under the ground. Step 2, the Minister of Conservation has to grant access onto the land. Step 3, the relevant councils have to grant the resource consents that would be required under the RMA. The discussion paper proposes a really significant change to Step 2, that's the granting of access by the Minister of Conservation. The change that is proposed is that the Minister of Conservation no longer gets to grant access. She, Kate Wilkinson, would, along with the Minister of Energy and Resources, Jerry Brownlee, have to jointly grant access to the conservation state for which she is responsible. I don't know how such joint decision-making is supposed to work. I do know it takes us back to the past when mining had a privileged status. Where would it stop? If you follow the logic, why wouldn't the Minister of Forestry jointly decide along with the Minister of Conservation to allow access to conservation land to cut down trees? If they're valuable enough, why not? And let's extend the principle in another direction. What if there are minerals under the ground in your backyard detected by aerial survey? The Minister of Energy and Resources could grant a mining company a permit to get the minerals out. But you couldn't make the access decision alone. You would have to make the access decision to grant access to your own land jointly with the same minister who has given the permit to the mining company. Okay, so I've extended the logic of that proposed change in 2 directions. So this proposed change is, in my view, extremely significant, and its implications go beyond the Schedule 4 issue. Another question in the discussion paper is concerned with the creation and allocation of a conservation fund. The money for the fund is envisaged as coming from royalties from mines on land that was taken off Schedule 4. The proposal is to cap the fund at $10 million. This is a paltry amount compared with the billions of dollars of minerals being talked about. This in itself is odd. Clearly the fund should not be capped. But what I find to be especially significant is that another joint decision-making process involving the same 2 ministers is being proposed. The fund is to be allocated by a panel of people with conservation expertise, and that panel is to be jointly appointed by the 2 ministers again. I am puzzled as to why a Minister of Energy and Resources should be involved in appointing experts on conservation. After all, the fund must not be used to clean up the impacts of mining. In my office, we have begun a thorough investigation into mining on conservation land. I expect to release a report in the near future before the government makes final decisions. So we have learnt so much during the submission process and feel that the public debate is so confused that I've decided that we will do a more thorough report. So in conclusion, in 1997, Parliament added Schedule 4 to the Crown Minerals Act to protect our special wild places for our children and grandchildren. The support for this was across Parliament. It was not a party political issue, nor should it be now. Thank you.